Morning, everyone. I'm Steve Fenske with the Minnesota Association of Townships. I'm one of your attorneys, one of those folks you can call up and ask for help on this or other subjects related to town government. Thank you for joining us today. This is the second of our web presentation series on the American Rescue Plan Act, and it's one that's got the most questions. It's what you can do with this money. And so today we're going to be going through a presentation that is available to you. It is recorded online already. It's been up for a couple days, but this one we're going to go through with you, and we can try and take some questions if possible. You'll hear from me today. You'll also hear from Karl-Christian Johannessen. We also have Jeff Krieger on. He may want to jump in at some point too. Okay, so please feel free to throw questions out. We'll try to take them as we go if we can. Otherwise, we'll try to get them at the end here.
Stephen, if I could just remind folks,
So
everybody's placed on screen.
Go ahead.
Yep, everybody's placed on mute because we have a lot of participants. We have about 115 people that have joined us so far. So, but there are, like Steve said, there's opportunities to ask questions, and please put those in the Q&A function. It's at the bottom of your screen. And so that way Steve will answer your questions and he'll see those as a panelist, and other folks can see those too, so we can keep moving. And this will be recorded and put on the MAT website. Thanks.
Thank you. So I'm going to move one screen here so you can see this nice, a larger view of this. All right, Leslie, are you able to see the screen?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, thank you. All right, so there's really a lot that you're going to be able to use this money for. There's good news. It's bigger than CARES Act was. Okay, so first thing, every township gets money. Every township has money set aside for it. And the way you find out how much it is to look first at a chart that we put online. And that's where the federal government has said, based on your township's population, here's the most you could get. And that's the first step. And then the second step is we look at your revenue, and you take 75% of it. And there's a couple ways they calculate revenue, because not all towns do that the same way. So depending on your township, you may have a different way of calculating that revenue. But the rule is you can get up to that population number value, and then it could be reduced by whatever is 75% of your revenue. But for a lot of townships, 75% of your revenue is probably going to exceed the population value that you see on the federal chart. That's available online, okay? The next piece of good news here, this is more uses than CARES Act, and that's what we're going to talk about quite a bit here today. The last kind of big picture idea is that we have a lot longer to use this than we did with CARES Act. So there's no hurry in spending it. If you're going to hurry over something, it's over the application. Right now, we want you to apply really as quickly as you can, because the state is talking about that they believe there's a deadline in August, and we're still working out whether that's the case, but they seem to think it is. So that application piece we're not going to talk about today. That is, again, online on the webpage, and we have an ARPA section. So if you go to our webpage, right at the top, there's a bar up there now with ARPA information. That's we're trying to kind of make that our central location for all this information. Okay, but on the uses, on the other big piece of this, there are 4 main categories of spending, and we're going to talk about those. And then we're going to touch on some things that it calls out, that the federal guidance calls out as ineligible. There's certain things we cannot do, and we'll talk about those. Okay, and we're going to bounce back and forth here between Karl and I a little bit. So the first broad category is similar to CARES Act in that it's responses to the pandemic. So these are things where there was some health effect that you can see and you can point to. And if we can look at it and say, okay, we have this problem and we're going to use the money to address it in this way, that is okay. The obvious ones, were well, PPE and sanitizer, and of course, those are not expensive things. Those are they were important, but not necessarily what you'll be using the money for this time around. This is probably the biggest set of things that you can do. Okay, it's not the freest set of restrictions. That will be in another category, but with this one, you can think big with some of these. All right, so for example, you're going to be able to do structural changes to your town hall if you need. You're going to be able to address the pandemic in kind of big picture ways. Okay, and we've put the test here. It's kind of in the middle here. So first, identify a current or future effect of the pandemic on public health. And when we say current or future, we're talking about March of this year out to December 31st of 2024. That's the window that we have to use. And with a couple exceptions, we can't go before March of this year for expenses. Okay, so it's something that it would have to come up or that you're going to have arise now. We can't go back and pay debt and things like that. It has to be something that we can say, okay, we're going to do this project now. It's starting, or we recognize it after March 3rd. And if that's the case, now we've met the current or future effect. And then we address how the expense would address this effect. So this is just connecting the dots of here's the problem that we have. We have a social distancing problem, say, for example, in the town hall. Here's our proposed solution that we're going to use this money for. And here's how it's going to help. And if you put that onto paper, that's acceptable. And we've heard some concerns from folks already of they're afraid that they're going to be told they did something wrong. I'd like to point out that we're a ways removed from the CARES Act, and we haven't seen anything like that at this point with the CARES Act. And there's billions of dollars in this program. Townships are receiving very little of it, okay? And the program is built to allow a lot of freedom, which is a little scary or a little uncomfortable for some folks, but it also means that you're less likely to do something wrong. So please, as long as you can find reasons that appear like they connects these two things, that's an acceptable expense. That's okay. All right. We'll get into some of the specific examples here. So one common one, we talked about, I mentioned expanding or improving the town hall or something like that. Well, a common question we had both in CARES Act and in ARPA already is, what about HVAC systems? And with this, it depends on what you're going to do. If it's a standard system, it's just a furnace and an AC, well, that doesn't address a COVID concern. Here, your COVID concern would probably be, we want to circulate air. We want to exchange air. And we have talked to professionals about this, and the answer has been no, a standard system doesn't do that. But if you add certain things to the system, it does do that. If you add air exchangers or you add certain filtration systems, not the standard kind, but something that your HVAC professional would be able to help you build, well, then you can use the ARPA money for that system, including if you need a new base system to support or supply that new system. Okay, so you may end up being able to pay for the standard part of it with the ARPA money because you're adding on that extra piece that you wouldn't normally have. Okay, that's a pretty big expense for a lot of townships, and that might be something you want to use the money for. With the town hall, it could be automated features. We've seen these in commercial buildings all the time: automatic doors, automatic faucets, toilets, anything where people don't have to touch something is preventing the spread of disease. That is something you could do with this money within your town hall. Those who, not all town halls are up to a point where you think you do that. Well, some folks can use this to improve the town hall. If your use of the money allows that town hall to be used more in a pandemic, it allows people to social distance. Maybe it provides more barriers between seating. Maybe it allows for separations among offices. Well, all of those address the concern of people interacting and keeping social distance. So that's something where you could use the money to improve the town hall, potentially even to make it larger if you need more space. A lot of townships had a problem even getting the board into the town hall during the pandemic. And if space is a true concern, here again, we've identified a problem related to the pandemic, and the solution may be to improve the access to the building. So there are some big picture things you can do here. Obviously PPE and that kind of thing, and that's that one we've mentioned, that's pretty standard. A bigger one that the counties and cities did with CARES Act is to create grant programs. And that's, again, available. And it's, I think, broader this time around. It can go to not only businesses, but families and individuals. It can go to nonprofits. It can go to all manner of things. When you do a grant program, the key pieces are that you have to have some kind of program, because it has to be related to a need, or you have to show need and why you gave it to certain groups or people, but not to others, or how much. But that doesn't mean it has to be really complicated. You need an application, some kind of rules about how you're going to score these or decide who gets what, as opposed to just going in and each supervisor saying, well, I feel like they should get this, some kind of rules or guidelines, a review process, and then an award. And maybe one report that the recipient gives you later to show, here's how we used our funds, that represents that they followed your rules. That's something that, since we have a lot more time in this program, I think towns will be able to do. You could partner with the county or city if you wanted to, but I think towns could accomplish this on their own as well. And this is another piece that Karl and I are looking at to try and maybe create a framework that townships could use, since it's something that they don't have a lot of experience with. Okay, but that can be a nice benefit for the community. Again, it doesn't always have to be for the township. This program was broadly created to help not just your local government, but the people who live and work there. So there's a lot of opportunity here. Technology. This one is, I'm strongly encouraging, if your township doesn't have computers, get computers. If your clerk and treasurer don't have a PC, get them one, because CTAS runs on Microsoft products. I know they may like something else, but CTAS is kind of becoming the way of the financial world for small governments. So provide it to them. Now, if they don't end up using it for that, that's fine. It's still available for them to use to work remotely, to video conference. All of that stuff can be supported by these machines. Now, for supervisors, it doesn't necessarily have to be the same kind of thing that they get, but there's no reason they can't get technology as well. They could get tablets, Chromebooks, which are relatively inexpensive. They could do computers, but they wouldn't necessarily need it. They're more expensive. That allows them to work remotely. It allows them to do email communication. It's remote computing and internet really powered industry through the pandemic, and remote working, where people could do that if they didn't have to be in the office. And so that's an obvious use of this money. Please, if you don't have this stuff, get it. It's there. It is not expensive. It is an obvious use for the money. Remember that when it's purchased for the township, it is the township's property. So it's not a personal item. When a supervisor leaves office or is voted out, they give it to the next person, and it's still there for the township's use. There's a lot of benefits to this in the pandemic and broadly. So please get these things. Even if somebody's not sure if they'll use it, it'll be there, it'll be available, and they may find they like it once they have it. Some townships have done audio-visual systems for the town hall, where they don't have to have, they'll have a public packet, but it doesn't necessarily need to be passed around, where you have people touching the same item or interacting to get the item. It allows for social distancing. It allows for people to see things a little bit better with that kind of distance. That's an acceptable use of the money. There's all manner of other technology that you can use that helps to reduce the interaction among people, and all those are good possibilities this money. All right, donations to service groups. This is not grants. This is the last one I'll touch on in this section. Grants are something where they have to apply and we're not sure if they're going to get money or not, but this is where it's a group that obviously is already doing something to address a pandemic problem. So food shelves are the most obvious example. A lot of people have had financial trouble during the pandemic and food shelf use has increased. So your money could go toward a food shelf. There are other family service groups or groups that support people in need, and you could give to them. It could be any other nonprofit that serves a pandemic purpose. Okay. Now, maybe it's a nonprofit, but they don't serve a pandemic purpose. Let's say it's a sports or recreational facility or recreational. It's a baseball association locally. Well, that's not serving a pandemic purpose. Okay. And we can try and say it is, but this is one that no, there's not really anything related to that we're saying in the first category fits the pandemic response. That could go in a grant though. It's not that they can't get money. It's just that it might have to go through a different procedure than if what they do obviously serves the community. If it's a nonprofit who's doing vaccination sites, well, that's obviously serving it. You don't have to go through a grant procedure to give to that. Okay. I put Matt on here as an example, another nonprofit, and we do education and support through the pandemic. So us and other groups that you may be working with locally would all be fair game under something like that, because there's an obvious connection to what they're doing with the pandemic and how it's serving you. Okay. So that is our first broad category. Carl, you want to take this one? I'm sorry. This is the last piece of it. This is transfers.
Yep. So this last part, like Steve said, is transfers to other entities. We know that at the end of the CARES Act, a lot of entities were looking to, or a lot of townships were looking to kind of move their funds to make sure it didn't, or that it was serving the community in some way. For instance, giving to your local school district. This is actually one of the few places where ARPA seems a little tighter than the CARES Act. Generally, transferring is going to be really difficult because the recipient, unless it's the state, will often need to abide by serving the town in some way. So towns should really look at this as a last resort. Remember, you have a long time to use this money. You have a long time to consider different things that could help you, or that the town could use it in some way. But in any case, if the town wants to transfer, it's also broader in some sense. Towns can transfer to local governments, the state government, but also nonprofits. There are going to be two major categories of who can receive transfers. The first is going to be subrecipients. And when I say transferring is more limited in this case, this is what I mean. This will be to local governments and nonprofits. Now, this limitation is that the Treasury rule states the transferee must abide by the restrictions on the use applicable to the transferor under ARPA and other applicable law and program guidance. In layman's terms, this is the town cannot transfer to another town, city, or nonprofit unless certain criteria are met. Namely, this will be that the recipient of the funds, the recipient of the transfers, has to, it is under the same rules as the township. Not only is it under the same rules in that the subrecipient has to use ARPA in the same way that the town would, but they also have to be serving the township in some way. In other words, this is a service that the town can't explicitly provide or doesn't have the ability to provide. So something common here could be like fire or EMS. You could transfer it to the city who does EMS for the township, and that would be a proper transfer. Further, nonprofits can also receive these transfers. So examples include food shelves, family and job assistance organizations, and then another like MAP again. This is similar to donations, but this is just, again, another different way to transfer to nonprofits. For those non-subrecipients, so transferring the funds back to the state, they aren't under this limitation. They just receive the funds and then they can use those funds as they are limited as the state. The next category here. So with that, we kind of wrapped up these responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we'll move on to this next big category, which should be premium pay. Steve, if you could move ahead the slide. Yep, premium pay. So premium pay will be for essential employees. They can receive a premium pay. As we've discussed earlier, most of ARPA is forward-looking, meaning it'll start in March of 2021 and then extend through 2024. This premium pay provision is a little bit different because it's backwards looking. It can be retroactive to the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. So you can provide your essential employees essentially hazard pay for the work they've done in mitigating this pandemic. The Treasury rules list out several essential workers. Most of these are going to be related to healthcare, but it also lists janitors and sanitation workers. But it also says that this isn't an exclusive list, meaning the town board, if they find other workers essential, for instance, town clerks in gathering information, doing research for the CARES Act or ARPA, or trying to keep up to date on the executive orders, that may be an essential worker and they could be eligible for premium pay. Premium pay is limited to some degree. You can't just give all of your ARPA funds to one employee. Essentially what premium pay says is that you can increase the essential worker's income up to a maximum of $13 per hour or $25,000 annually. This does have to be in addition to the wages already paid by the township. The premium pay can't be used in lieu of paying the worker their standard wage. So if the clerk receives if the sanitation worker receives $20 an hour, you can't pay them less for a period and then match that with the premium pay. They would have to be paid the standard wage and then an increase on top of that. So this can be again utilized. In other words, the township has to pay the standard wage the employee would have earned without the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Just for a brief example here, if the town hired a person to clean the town hall to be in compliance with deeds guidance, I remember it needed quite the extensive sanitation to make sure things were kept well sanitized to remain healthy. The town could have paid that employee $15 per hour and may retroactively increase that employee's pay to a maximum of $28 an hour, again, starting when the worker began their work to comply with deed guidance. Next slide. So as Steve said, the response to the COVID-19 pandemic may be one of the broader categories, but it's not necessarily the freest. This will be your freest category, lost revenue replacement. This is interesting for towns because not a lot of towns saw lost revenue in the ways that we commonly think about it, but I'll go into that deeper here. So just in general, this can be used for government services. It can be used for road maintenance. It can be used for paying different bills like your fire contract. But it's only for pay-go funded projects, meaning projects that are funded as you go along. So if you had to take out debt for anything, for instance, if you have a large road project and you had to either do certificates of indebtedness or bond for that, you can't pay off that debt with the lost revenue. But if you're applying gravel each and every year to those roads, that can be paid for with the lost revenue replacement. How we determine what lost revenue replacement is a complicated formula from the Department of Treasury that confused a lot of people when we saw it. Just in general, if you want to work through this yourself, you can, but there are tools online. For instance, there's a calculator, uses an Excel spreadsheet, real simple to use. I know it's going to be hard to see here, but in general, we can see here that the town can just put in their base revenue, which is the amount they levied in 2019. Then it'll use this growth adjustment. So the town can either look at its 3 previous years, 2017 to 2019, or it can use the rate given by the Department of Treasury. What the Department of Treasury did is they looked at all the local governments in the US and determined just on average, how much did they increase the amount of revenue they received. And through that, it's about 4.1%. And this is mostly due to inflation, but there are sometimes other factors involved in that too. So anytime the town has revenue, they can, the Treasury expects them to receive or increase that by 4.1%. Now, what lost revenue looks at is the day or the revenue the town had before the pandemic started. So this will be at the end of the town's last fiscal year before the pandemic, which is December 31st of 2019. And so you'll just want to make sure that that date is correct in the calculator. After you put in all that information, the calculator will tell you your counterfactual revenue. What it means by counterfactual revenue is the amount that the town should have received if the town didn't lose revenue per the COVID-19 pandemic. And so in essence, what this tells you is that if your revenue was $100,000, you should have in 2020 had a revenue of $104,000. And then that'll again increase over time. In this final section, you can add your actual revenue for those years, the amount you actually levied, and then it'll spit out the amount of revenue loss you have over those years. So also, it's really hard to see here. If you just use an example of $100,000 each and every year, you should receive about $4,000 for the first year, $8,000 for the next year. And so in 2020 and 2021 alone, if your levy remains stagnant, from $100,000, then you should be expected to have about $12,000 in revenue loss that can be used to pay for government services. I just want to run through a couple of examples here. There's a lot of text. And so what I urge you to do is to take the calculator, play around with it, investigate it, try to work with it, and see what your town's lost revenue might look like. But in general, so if we take the town levy, just remaining stagnant from 2017 to 2019, the town can use, or if we take the stagnant revenue or the stagnant levy and plug it into the calculator, we can see there's no growth to calculate. So the town should use the defined inflation rate of the Treasury of that 4.1%. And then based upon that rate, the town's expected to receive about $104,000 in 2020, $108,000 in 2021, $112,000 in 2022, and $117,000 in 2023. If the town's levy doesn't reflect this amount in those years, the town can use the difference between that year's levy and the expected levy from the Treasury based upon the inflation rate as your lost revenue. So like I said, in 2020, the town has a lost revenue if this levy of $100,000 remains stagnant of $4,000. If it again remains stagnant in 2021, then between 2020 and 2021, you'll have about $12,000 of revenue loss. Let's look at the second example. So the town has a levy of $100,000 in 2018 and 2019, but because of a project in 2017, they increased it massively to $200,000. Although there was growth at the beginning of this cycle, the growth rate actually declined since 2017. So the town will want to use that 4.1% as its growth adjustment. The Treasury lets us put that in. And so you can use that even if the revenue looks like it, or that growth looks like it's going down for the township in the subsequent years. So because of this, the town will essentially be perceived as having a 4.1% growth rate in 2020 in 2020. And so the town will receive the same amount in those years as an example one. So again, that $104,000, the $108,000 in 2021, the 112 in 2022, and the 117 in 2023. Now we're going to use a fairly similar scenario in example 3, where the town levied $100,000 in 2017 and 2018, but because of a project, the levy increased to $200,000 in 2019. Now this is going to be not a common scenario for a lot of towns, but the annual growth rate is actually above what the Treasury expects. Here it's massive at 41.5%. And so any reduction to that is going to be presumed to be part of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so if we look at those previous years of having something, or if we look at those previous years of having a consistent levy of be it $200,000 or $100,000, the town is going to have a lot of money sitting in that lost revenue camp. So in 2020, the town should have increased its levy to $283,000 in 2021 to about $400,000 in 2022 to about $566,000 and in 2023 about $801,000. Again, if the town's levy doesn't reflect this amount in those following years, it may use the difference between those years and the expected levy based on that, again, growth rate as its lost revenue count. So if you maintain that $200,000 levy through 2023, the town will have lost revenue of about $83,000 in just 2020 alone and can use all that money towards government services. For this last example, if the town maintained its levy of $100,000 in 2017 and 2018, but because of a budget surplus, it reduced that levy massively to $0 in 2019. The town didn't have any lost revenue in 2020. The town wasn't expected necessarily to grow per the Treasury's rules. And so the town actually doesn't have the ability to use any lost revenue in those cases. Again, this is really complicated. What I would urge you is to go use that calculator. That calculator will help you through these processes in telling you what is revenue loss, how much the town actually lost. It's a straightforward tool, fairly simple to use. So yeah.
Okay, if you're confused by revenue loss, that's okay. This is a confusing topic. The point is revenue loss is an opportunity to use this money most like general fund money. It's not quite general fund, but it's very similar. All right. If you're confused by this, all you'd want to do is open up the calculator again on the web page, enter the top line, okay, which was your revenue. Make sure that the date is correct on the fiscal year date. And if it's not correct right now, we will update it so it's just there and done. Okay. And then at the bottom, you go down and in the green actuals, you would know your actual for 2020 and you put in your actual. And if you do nothing else, you look to the right. And if you have some money available there, that's fair game because if nothing else, you can use the 4.1% rate. Okay. What this should also tell you outside of ARPA is that your local governments raise their levy, even if it's a little bit each year for inflation. It'd be good practice for townships to do that too. Okay. All right. So infrastructure. We have read this a little bit. Water and sewer. I'm going to only lightly touch on this because townships don't have a lot of this. This was set up so that local governments could use ARPA money for water infrastructure. If you have a community septic or something like that, you may be able to use it for this. And the federal government is using the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund rules as the basis. So if you have a water system or you're interested in a water system, you can talk to us, you can talk to your town attorney and try figure out if the project would qualify under one of these fronts. And if it does, then you might be able to use your money for it. These are complicated. We don't do a lot of them. So I'm going to leave that there. Okay. Broadband is a bigger thing that townships can use this money for. If you want to use it for broadband, this is aimed at infrastructure. And it is aimed at providing infrastructure that meets, I believe it's a 100 by 100 as a federal standard, but you'd have to partner with a broadband service provider. So it's probably your local internet service provider or phone company, and see if they're interested in helping you to expand service in your area. And they might be. And depending on the amount of money you have, this may be feasible or it may not. Okay, it depends on what kind of thing you're talking about installing. Certain things are very expensive to install. So this might be one where you work with the county, you work with other townships if that's of interest, and you can expand broadband service. And this is not just to the town hall, this is to the community. This is to businesses and households, because broadband to the household or to the business allows them to do more remotely. There is a pandemic response to this. Okay, so that's another opportunity for you if you want. But it does have to meet certain criteria. What they build out has to meet certain criteria so that it is capable of running these remote applications. If you don't have very good internet, you probably already know it. Video chat does not work very well. It has to be capable of that, capable of downloading, and capable of uploading, meaning you send from your machine out to the world. That's production. So those are options for you as well. Carl, you want to hop back on and do specific ineligibles?
Yep. So as we see, there are specific eligible expenditures, and if they don't fall in those categories, they'll be ineligible. But our American Rescue Plan Act also calls out specific things that are ineligible. It might be seen as related to the COVID-19 pandemic, but they wanted to be clear that these aren't eligible to use the ARPA funds on. The first one is going to be a deposit into a pension fund. This is actually fairly narrow. It's narrower than just a deposit into a pension fund. It only applies if two factors are met. One, the payment reduces the township's liability incurred prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. And two, the payment occurs outside of the recipient's regular timing for making such payments. So this has to deal with if there are any issues with the pension fund, again, occurring prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and someone is getting more paid into that than what is normal. Again, this is going to be distinct from the town's payroll contributions, meaning it does not apply to benefits that are included in the employee's wage, such as their 401k or pension, only increases to the pension funds as outlined above. The other major ineligible expenditure is going to be related to the town's reduction in net tax revenue. This is only if the reduction, it comes from a change in law, regulation, or administrative interpretation. So something like the electors reducing the levy at the annual meeting is not going to be a reduction in net tax revenue. But if there's a law passed at the state level that will reduce the amount of revenue that comes into the township, that will be specifically ineligible. It also broadly says other restrictions on use. This will namely be other federal restrictions. For example, a town can't use ARPA funds as a local match for a federal grant if the federal grant doesn't allow you to use federal funds to match that grant. So yeah, with that being said, we'd be happy to take any questions now and try to work through these.
All right, so Leslie, our screen share has stopped, right?
That's correct. And you got a bit of questions in the Q&A. Do you want me to take those, Steve, or do you just want to work through those? And
I can work through them. Before I hop to that, I want to reiterate, there is no hurry to spend. Please get this money. And then if nothing else, you let it sit in your bank account. First thing, the interest that it generates, you keep without restriction. It's general fund surplus to you. Okay. Second, we're very early in this process. We have several years, and we don't know if Congress is going to change something. And Matt, along with other township associations across the nation, are already trying to get Congress to allow road infrastructure to be an eligible use for this. Sewer and water, I struggle to connect that to the pandemic. If they can do that, why can't they do roads? That's kind of what we're pointing out, and that this is most useful to us if we can do this with roads. So if you're not sure if something applies to you here yet, that's not a reason not to do it. Please make sure you apply, get it into your account. If nothing else, you're going to partner with people in your community, the nonprofits that you work with, or you're going to do grants, and you will be able to use this money. I challenge any township that thinks they don't have a use for this money, because this is so broad. The difficulty is in deciding what you're going to do. That's the real difficulty, because there's so many options to you. Okay, so questions. Application, that's in a different presentation. And I'm not sure which system you're in, because it depends on where you're in SAMS and DUNS. Why don't you email that one to us, and we'll try to walk through exactly where you are. Eric, do you have a sample resolution to apply for funds? No, because you don't need one. The League of Cities talked about this because they thought we would need one. We needed one for CARES. And so they were trying to be, on the ball, and they said, well, we have to have this resolution. You do not need a resolution. You may do this with a motion, and it's because we're not applying through the state here. The last time around, it was the state that wanted a resolution. State can't put any extra guidance or restrictions on this program. So you may do this with a simple motion at a meeting that directs somebody to apply for the money. If you would like to use a resolution, you could. The league has a sample one online. We may get to putting one up for you too, if you'd really like to use one. But since you don't have to, it's a little bit of a back burner issue. It's just an added thing that you don't have to do. And so that's why we haven't talked about it, okay? A resolution is just fine. ORAC, for example, did a motion, no resolution. ORAC did it, you can do it. Reno, what's the difference in the term revenue and budget? And I'm sorry, I might be confusing these. They've been used interchangeably at times or mistakenly at times. So when you're doing your trying to figure out how much you can get, you're going to look at the revenue. Okay, so I believe is the right one for that. So we look at the population number, and then we go to what 75% of your revenue. Do I have that right, Carl, that you recall? Or is that one budget?
I believe that one's budget. I think
okay.
that, and I believe the Treasury said that that's the total amount you spent if you don't have a formalized budget.
I recall this now. So if you have a formalized budget, like cities have a formal budget that they send into the state auditor, that's what the state was using to base the 75% off of, but towns don't do that. So there's several options. There could be, well, if you sent one in, you'd have this number that's available at the state auditor, but otherwise, if you had some other formal budget process, we would take that. But if you don't have that, they're going to use your 2019 actual expenditures for determining that part of it. So it kind of depends on in what piece we're into here to figure out what you have available to you. And there's certain times where you have to deduct something like capital project expenses. In certain places, you can't include what you have budgeted for capital expenses. We're trying to spell those out again, step by step in those videos we have online, because we want no concern that somebody can't do this, so we are trying to make sure in each place that you need to use revenue or budget, we're using the right term in that for that particular piece, and then telling you here's what you can use to find that. So I don't have a straight answer, but they're using different things for different pieces of this whole system. And questions bounce to the bottom, excuse me. Okay, Chris, could we use funds to expand the town hall to safely hold elections? Yes, you can. That can give you more social distancing. The other one I want to remind people of is an ADA ramp or two. If you're trying to create a one-way flow of traffic, you may need another door, another exit. Okay, if you don't have ADA compliant doors, now is a good time to install those with this. Those kind of things, use the town hall and use it safely. without need to try and make reasonable accommodations. That's what we do in the ADA. When you don't provide something that someone can use, you try to reasonably accommodate them, but that usually involves getting very close to other people to move them and to help them. Well, if we want to keep distancing, one piece of that is giving them the space to enter and exit. Okay. One-way flow of traffic, you need another door. That's fine. You get another door installed. You may need another ramp. And if that's out to a back area where there's no sidewalk, you may need a sidewalk or some kind of exit way around. All of that related to what you're trying to do with this money, facilities that people can use and distance and respond to the pandemic. Laura, could we use funds to expand the, oh, I'm sorry, that was Chris. Automatic towel dispensers and soap dispensers installed, can use them to pay ongoing monthly bills. If they're debt, then no. If they're new costs and they're related to the pandemic, then I would say yes. But if this is under a contract you already had, then we should start with no until we identify if it's a current or past expense, because we can't use it for any debt spending. We already have computers. Can we use them to get updates? Yeah, you can. Whether you use them and when a technology is outdated or not is up to the board to decide. If you feel something isn't working, it's fair to get something new. You can accomplish that. As an aside, the old stuff can't ever go to you guys. Never, ever, under any circumstance. That is a hard and fast, no exception rule. Can't go to your spouse either, for the criminal masterminds out there. If you're getting new stuff, the old stuff can be sold out into the community. It can be disposed of if you properly wipe all the data off it first. Make sure you do that. But in general, when you're ready to get new equipment because the old stuff is outdated or it's not functioning properly, that is a board decision within board discretion. Is updating the website an approved expense? I have not seen a convincing argument of how a website relates to public health on a township level. It might for other governments, maybe counties that are providing public health information on a regular basis. I struggle with that one. That's not to say you can't, but put it on paper. And can you create some compelling reasons that would convince somebody that, oh yeah, this makes sense as a response to the pandemic? Meaning it would have to actually consistently respond to or address pandemic issues. See what you can come up with. I think that's going to be your starting point, and see if you've convinced yourself and if you think it would convince somebody else. Heidi, if we already have technology, how is it acceptable to update? Same answer as before. Yes, you can update in the discretion of the board if they think that's appropriate, or switch to different things. iPads are wonderful for people who like Apple. They're also really expensive. Okay, not necessary for town government. It's your choice. You can do that. But remember, clerks and treasurers, to run CTAS, you need PC. Aaron, our town hall does not have internet. Can we justify using the money for internet to the building? Yes, you could, because that's going to support remote work, remote meetings, broadcasting of township meetings, data transfer, so that you don't have to have people coming in and going. There's all kinds of reasons you can do with that. It can also end up being a community hotspot that people can come to and use that if they don't have it at home. Those are acceptable expenses to use the money on. And with that, that falls into the first category. That's a response to the pandemic. That's not the fourth category we talked about, where it's broadband. I know that may seem counterintuitive, but that fourth category of broadband infrastructure, that's a little bit different. And that entails you're going to a provider and giving your money to them to expand your infrastructure. Okay, now it may happen to fall in that if what they give you meets those standards, but it is also category one here. So potential to hit two of these. Forrest, under technology, can we do printers with fax capacity? I suppose you can. Faxes have largely moved online. Fax isn't necessarily done through the phone the way it was. It's really just email that's delivered through a fax kind of disguise. So yes, that's a potential for you if you need to do something like that. And again, related to how this connects to the pandemic response. Why is this somehow related to it? Angie, where's the money coming from? The money's coming from the federal government, which means it's all federal taxpayers. If you don't use it, does it go back? No. No, federal government does not give money back generally. If your township doesn't use it, it's going to go back to the federal treasury. So I don't even believe it's going to the state this time around. I think it does go back to the federal government. It is not going to be back to the taxpayers, though. It's just going to be used for some other federal purpose at that point. Can we explain rock and gravel again? With rock and gravel, you would be able to use it for those purposes if you have revenue loss. And that's that calculator that Carl talked about. So if you have any revenue loss money, that becomes more like general fund, where you can use it for gravel and rock, road maintenance, kind of general purposes. Okay, are we using the number for the levy in 2019 or 2020? I think you're talking about the calculator, Pam. It is the 2019 in the top box, and in the bottom, the actual revenue. And it's the first box, it's the green column, and that's the 2020 section. So you'll need both of them. And it would be, I believe, all revenue from that. Laura, I thought we cannot count lower tax settlement revenues received. I'm not quite sure what you mean in that one. Laura, and get the next couple of questions because my mouse froze. You are on
the next
Carrie Tyson.
Yep. When calculating the lost revenue, we do not include the CARES Act funds that we received, correct? I believe so. I believe that is one of the limitations and what's not considered part of your revenue. The next one is from B. Carlson. Do we include non-levy revenue in this calculation? Generally, yes, though you'll want to double check with specific Treasury guidance or reach out to us if you have any questions. For example, like the CARES Act, that might not be considered part of that revenue that you've received. Franklin Township. What if the township used reserve funds to keep the levy the same for the last 3 years? Then you would, that would still be part of that revenue that the town brought in. So if the revenue is the same for those years, there's still an expected growth of 4.1% of that levy each year. And so if it remained the same, even though you're using reserve or surplus funds, then that still should be expected to grow by that 4.1%. You would just want to put in your actual revenue for 2019 and then your actual revenue for the subsequent years, just to determine about how much revenue your township actually lost. Chris says, is the loss of revenue based on total revenues or just levy revenue? Again, it's total revenues with some restrictions. Again, I think something like the CARES Act wouldn't be included, but something like permits or other administrative fees that you may take on, that may be included as part of that revenue calculation. Our town has a rental revenue that was 100% lost in 2020. How is that allowed for? You would look at your Larry says, you would look at your previous year's revenue and you would see how much that grew. And if that's above that 4.1%, you would include that as part of your revenue or as part of your growth rate. But in 2020, it's just looking at your total revenue, again, with some restrictions. And so part of that total revenue that you may have lost in 2020 that was expected to occur from looking at 2019 will be part of your revenue loss. So say you were expected to receive about $5,000 in rental revenue in 2020, just based upon 2019, 2018, 2017, then that revenue loss there would be about $5,000, maybe a little more with that growth rate. Lori asked us to repeat where to find the calculator. So if you go to our website, mntownships.org, there's an ARPA info section. That should lead you to a couple of different tabs. And under one of the tabs, ARPA uses, there will be a link to that calculator. Larry asked the same thing about the site for the lost revenue calculator. Again, that's on our website under the ARPA info section and the ARPA uses tab. Dan is also asking the same question. Yeah, so Diane.
Oh, God.
All right, I'll hand this over to you.
All right, Diane, are we including the fire levy? Yes, you include the fire levy. It's total revenue. It doesn't break it out that way. It's just whatever you got in there. It's all your sources. Can we use funds to continue to pay Wi-Fi fees for the network we use to allow for online meetings? Yes, if you, again, Sherry, if you can connect it to your COVID response, your pandemic response, then you can use it for that under the category, the first category. Category 1, it's your response to the pandemic. So again, put it on paper. What are you doing with it? And how does it address a pandemic need? And so if it's supporting remote meetings, Zoom or whatever you're using, that qualifies. In general with these, if you're going to do a resolution, like I said, you don't need one to access the funds, but it's a good idea to do one for spending to justify, here's the problem we've got, here's how we're using the money, and here's how they connect. If you're going to do anything, do that. That's appropriate. And same thing, we're going to try and put up some samples so people can see, here's kind of what this looks like, and you have a framework to use. Can you use money in more than one category? Absolutely. You can separate them out. That is perfectly acceptable to do, and I expect most townships will use them in more than one category. Where do we find the Excel revenue loss calculator? Online. Carl touched on that one. What if we voted no levy increase? It depends on the year and it depends on the circumstances. This is where, again, you have to go through the calculator. And if there's shown no revenue loss there, then the next steps are to figure out, do we have one of those special circumstances that Carl talked about in the examples? Okay. And with those, why don't you call us and we'll try and figure out, do you have an ability to make any adjustment that breaks out of the calculator? The calculator is kind of the standard model, but some towns have a special circumstance that allows them to change. Stormwater as it relates to culvert replacement. If I believe at least one category within the Clean Water State Revolving Fund does touch on culverts. I don't think it's all culverts, but I did have that question a few weeks back, Lucinda, and I think that might qualify depending on the circumstances of the culvert. So we'd have to look at, does the federal Clean Water State Revolving Fund provide money for this particular culvert or its particular purposes? And if yes, you could use ARPA for it. Bonnie, you're doing a disservice by showing slides on your cell phone. It's not a cell phone. I'm not sure how to answer that one. My town has a 201 sewer for 88 households. So there's a community septic, can use money towards the upgrade of septic to comply. My guess with this is it's probably going to fit a clean water fund because you have a septic system and you want to mitigate any discharge problem or any harmful water issues. So my guess is, Linda, if anything I've heard today, this is most likely a yes on the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. And it might even qualify under a revolving fund. And for those, we've tried to put the links or the descriptions of the project types that qualify under those two programs. And we try and find, okay, where might this fit within these bullet points? Okay, so that's what we would want to look at. Again, we can look more closely at that with you if you'd like to, but this one I suspect we're going to find a yes. Joe, would it be allowed to match a county grant for broadband when the county's money also comes from ARPA? Absolutely, you can pool your ARPA money. That's going to be the answer for some to get broadband. They're going to pool their funding. And as long as you're getting a service, because as Carl mentioned here, you have to get a service, whether it's a transfer, you certainly have to get a receipt of something, okay, as they're a recipient, or directly as a broadband infrastructure, it has to give your township something. This can't just improve the city neighboring or something like that. You want to make sure it's your township. Infrastructure, replace a well. Daryl, I tend to doubt it's replacing a well, because that might not be on a wide enough scale for a Clean Water State Revolving Fund. And I know we've had discussions with the legislature about, can we work townships, individual landowner septic and well needs into that? And so far it's been no. So my guess is we're going to end up with a no on that one, but we could look through the bullet points and see if there's something that might fit. Connie, if you get money, how can you put it into CD? Sure, there's no, you can still invest money under Chapter 118A the same way we do with anything else. Those are your investment limits, and that's a fine thing to do. And if you get the interest off of it, that's fine. It becomes general fund for you. You don't have to remit that. There's something left over at the end. What's the deadline to apply? Pam, there is no deadline to apply in the state, in the federal guidance. And that is something Jeff in particular is working on right now with the state MMB, because they feel that there's some kind of deadline, but they haven't given us a date. And so we're trying to understand what is it they're looking for. I think as a safe target right now, August, please have this done in August. And it's not like it's a drop dead. The state's last statement on this was that, well, if a township doesn't say that they're interested, then the state can reassign money to another local government if they would like to. So right now, we're looking at probably a couple months of time to apply, and it shouldn't take that long. So this is a good question. I don't have a firm answer for a conceived one. What if the county is using money for broadband as well? That's fine. Again, no problem. You can partner with them. They may not expand all the places you want. So there's no problem there. You're separate governments, right? There's nothing they can do or you can do that will restrict each other's use of ARPA money. Do you still need a SAMS number? Sort of, Amy. SAMS is where you put your DUNS number. So it's not really a SAMS number that you need. It's that you're taking the DUNS number and registering it in the SAMS system. And in the SAMS system, that's how the federal government gets to see you. Okay, DUNS itself is just a private company, like a credit reporting bureau. SAMS is where the federal government says, oh, okay, we know that you have registered and you're gonna be doing some kind of business with us. And that is in the first presentation we have, also online now, okay? That talks step by step by step. Literally every step that we could find that you should see should be in that presentation. If you find something that isn't, tell us. And if you know how to take a screenshot of it, please do, because we will incorporate what you saw if it's something that needs to be in that presentation. The interest can go into the general fund. Yeah, interest is yours. General fund money, that's fine. Which decides the amount, the higher of the population or 75%. Population is the highest. It may be reduced by 75% of revenue. And this is one of those where there's different ways to calculate it. Okay, so if you look first at the population number, and that's your total, you're not going to get more than that. Now it could be reduced if you're 75% of I think budget, as Carl said, is less. But most townships, we think, are going to get the full amount that federal government allocated to them. You could do automatic doors for exit lines. You can do that among other automatic or touchless amenities. Friedenberg, help justify for ARPA use pandemic related to interpersonal relations. Call me. Let's talk about this one. I doubt it, but I think we can help you with this one. Gussie, still pretty muddy. I'm sorry it's muddy. Either or per capita. Okay, so this is the same one as before. Folks, take these one little step at a time. And we did this uses seminar because folks will not stop asking us, what can we use the money for? But to be honest, right now, your only focus should be on getting the money in the door, okay? Get it into the bank account. This is a thing where we have all these different boxes and steps, and we're way over here, and we really should be at step one, okay? So Gussie, I think you're looking at what are you gonna get? How much are you gonna get? So we can look at the sheet for your population number, and then you're gonna take 75% of it. It's your 2020 budget, if you reported that in any way, or if you didn't do that, it's gonna be your 2019 actual spending. So this is, it depends on what you have there, okay? And there's a possibility that you can use the one that's more advantageous to you, okay? So we'll if you have more questions about it, let us know. The other thing with the amount of money you're gonna get, the state is gonna be distributing the money. You're gonna get what they decide you're supposed to get, okay? And we may be able to push back on that, but we'll have to have reasons to do it. Fee for Microsoft Business. If there's something in there that you're using to help accommodate the pandemic response, then yes. How do you get the application online? So Mike and Susan, again, go to our ARPA page. step-by-step instructions. It's the first video we have there on how to apply. And we've, again, tried to take every single step that we could get that you'll have to go through to get the money into the bank. Kelly, can we use it for Zoom? Absolutely. Could you use it a couple of years in advance? I think you could, because this program runs out to 2024. That looks like it's acceptable. AED units. I think you're talking automatic defibrillators. I don't know. I don't know the specifics on this one. I would ask for help from somebody who knows, is that at all related to a pandemic response? I don't know if that is. That's more of a health question. Water supply for the fire department at irrigation wells. No, I don't see how that's a pandemic response in any way. A note on fire departments. They were clamoring to get money in CARES Act. In ARPA, they have their own set aside. Okay, they have their own set aside. So fire departments should be taken care of by that. Or remember, they're often run by another government. Their own government got money they provide. So cautious with transfers. What is CTAS? CTAS, Amy, is the a small city and town accounting system that's offered by the state auditor. It's a pretty powerful and nice accounting software that we strongly recommend. It integrates what you need as a government for financial reporting and the recording and reporting that you have to do to the state each year. Complete the town hall. Yes, Gus, you can do that. Again, if you can relate it to the pandemic. Franklin, purchasing equipment for ditch cleaning. Only if it falls into the general revenue loss category. And Gussie, I'll go back. Likewise, if you have revenue loss, that becomes general fund that you could use on the town hall. Okay, but in general, road stuff by itself isn't a category, at least not yet. Windows in the building, Pam, same thing. Unlikely, maybe ventilation. I don't know. Again, put your reasons down and find out if you think it will qualify, or use it as general revenue loss. If there's revenue loss money, again, that's like general fund. You could use it for this. Manana, my favorite township name. Can we use the money to replace playground equipment? I tend to doubt it. Again, see if you can come up with something that's compelling of how does this address a pandemic need, except with your revenue loss money. And you can see if you have revenue loss money, this is powerful. My last 4 answers have been if you have revenue loss money, yes, you can use it for that. Ideal, talk to us about ADA compliant websites. This is a misunderstanding. I'd like to talk to you about that. Fire contract. I suppose you could do it with your general revenue loss money. Otherwise, if they're your EMS provider, perhaps you could. You'd want to look at that one carefully because it might be debt already incurred too before you do that. What's the deadline? Deadline, Sue, was for right now, for practical purposes, aimed for August, but there is no specific deadline we've been given. Road allotment. I'm not sure what you mean, included as revenue. Oh yes, yeah. So your road money, again, all of the money that comes in is money for revenue purposes. Okay, that's all included. Laura, specific. I'm not going to touch on specific calculator loss revenue questions because they're so specific. Every single one of these townships is going to be different. So use the calculator and then call us if you want on the calculator questions. 4 categories: pandemic response, lost revenue, infrastructure, and premium pay. Those are the 4. And anything we've said here is covered on the recorded presentation that's already online. And it's since we could record it, we kept it down to 23 minutes or so. It's tight. It's gives this and should be able to help you there too. Okay. Can we apply for ARPA funds before a board motion? I wouldn't. I'd do a special meeting if you need to, post notice, and 5 days later you have your special meeting to decide to do it. That's the way I would handle it, especially if you're a clerk or a treasurer. Can we apply before? Same question there. Sonia, all of the stuff we intend to put on our website. At the top, there's a banner of links in the ARPA section. Okay, ARPA info section. Everything we have, we're trying to get there. So this is a one-stop place for you to go for all of this information. Sue, yes, you can possibly use this for water or sewer if the project would qualify under a federal grant there. I will do one more and then I'll leave it because we're at an hour and 10. Local nonprofit approaches us with documented loss. Can we give them money? So possibly under two ranges here. One would be a grant program, if you're going to establish a grant program. The second would be if it's a nonprofit that clearly is serving a pandemic need, then you don't necessarily need that grant process where they apply and show what they do. Okay, so you want some information about them, but showing loss by itself is not necessarily a reason to give it to them. So we got through a lot of questions, and I think a lot of these are getting repeats. So folks, thank you for getting on. I'm really happy that we got so many folks on short notice. So use the recorded session. Please, as you have county unit meetings, I know are starting up again, please let folks know that this stuff is online and we're here, because we want to make sure every township applies for this stuff, even if you don't know what you're going to use it for yet. We want to try and help facilitate that. Remember, there's a long time here. We have a long time to figure this out. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We hope this was helpful to you. Let us know if there's anything we can add to the programs online, and we'll see if we can do that too. So thank you.